What are the biggest challenges you see in your clinical engineering services provided by Hilditch?
I didn't mention engineering as one of our business areas actually. So we have our own in-house engineers here at Hilditch. We've got a small team and a workshop here on site. In terms of challenges to the business, it's a really interesting space to work in. So there's a few different aspects to it. I should declare up front, I'm not an engineer, never have been, but obviously with what we do here, some of what our engineers do is directly related to our sales. So they do condition reporting. They test equipment as it comes in. Is it functional? If it's not, what faults does it have? If it's incomplete, what's missing? If it is complete, can we list everything that comes with it, accessories and such like? So they do condition reporting, they do the removal of patient data, which is obviously a really important aspect, maybe we can come back to in a second. So obviously lots and lots of assets these days store patient identifiable data, PID. We've got to safely remove that, securely remove that, and then certificate that back to the vendor. So our engineers handle that, but they also do some other work. So they can service items post-sale. So if a buyer buys an item in our auction or through direct sale, and they want to put it into use, so a dentist buys an item, or a vet buys an item, or an optician buys an item, whoever it might be, they might be based in the UK or in Europe or wherever, and they might say, actually, before I come and pick up my item, could you guys give it a service? The answer more often than not is yes. So that's one of the tasks our guys here take on. And then we also do some external work, a small number of PPM contracts and service contracts for various organizations, public and private, on various different assets. So it could be anything from operating tables to ultrasounds that we go out and maintain on a regular basis. Final aspect of what the engineers here do is the installation of fixed assets. So we had a great example yesterday where we had two engineers on site removing a ceiling mounted operating microscope. So it's from my perspective, a fairly tricky and involved job. It's not something you want to be dropping from the ceiling of an ophthalmic theatre. So that's a couple of engineers out for the day with some specialist kit to bring that item safely down from the ceiling and then bring it back here for sale. So again, it's feeding into that sale piece of what we do.
Yeah, the recruitment and retention are common concerns. How is Hilditch addressing this? And then that doesn't just have to be isolated to these guys, but in general, with a bit of a focus.
I mentioned the HR people side of my role is probably one aspect I find really difficult.
Yeah.
And recruitment is one of the aspects of my job I really enjoy, but I do find it tough. And that's for any role. Engineers specifically, we've been recruiting for recently and thankfully successfully got a great new starter in the last couple of weeks who's bedding in really well with our team. But yeah, it is difficult. In terms of the recruitment piece, it's what you can offer a potential employee. What we offer here at Hilditch, and you've mentioned it earlier actually, Johnny, is the variety of the role. I've not previously worked in different organizations as an engineer, but the impression I get is sometimes you can be a little bit pigeonholed. You can have your specialism in terms of department or equipment. You might be in theatres or you might be just into operating tables in your case, you mentioned before. What our guys do here is they have the opportunity to work on a massive range of equipment, literally almost anything that comes out of a hospital or healthcare setting. So one day they might be testing flexible endoscopes, the next day they might be deinstalling an X-ray, the next day they might be doing a repair on some syringe rollers. And I think that variety doesn't appeal to everybody, but I think that does attract some really strong candidates when we've recruited in the past. So that really, really helps. We're also a little bit different in where we're based. We're not a big city hospital. We're not
location.
Yeah, we're not a territory-based role in terms of being a field service engineer. Yeah. We're caught somewhere between the two. We're based in a relatively small town in North Wiltshire kind of thing. So that has its attractions to some people and probably maybe makes us less attractive to some candidates. But on the whole, over the years, we've done pretty well at retaining some really, really strong engineers and recruiting some really promising engineers as well.
I think it's how do you develop and retain talent in such a technically demanding field?
So with engineers specifically, one of our approaches over the last few years really has been to take engineers with maybe slightly less experience, and I'm very reluctant to say young because they don't have to be. Some of the engineers we've taken on haven't been in their early 20s. They've been a little bit later in their careers, but they haven't got maybe as wide an experience across the medical field. They might have an engineering background from another field, or they may have recently come into the engineering world, let's say. So we've taken on that sort of candidate and we've developed them internally. Because of the wide array of equipment we have access to and is required of our engineering team, it means a lot of engineers here have a chance to really develop different interests. So we took on a graduate, I'm going to get my dates wrong, 3 years ago, I think. And he was exposed to obviously the whole range of equipment, and he really took an interest in flexible endoscopy. And that's become his real strong suit, his real specialism. He's proactively gone out and researched the area. He's gone out on the right training courses. He's obviously gained plenty of experience in-house here.
Yeah.
Draw on the experience of some of our more experienced engineers as well. And he's become our expert. He is the go-to guy on scopes now. So in terms of in terms of developing engineers, the variety isn't for everyone. He still gets involved in other areas, but he's become really, really kind of key in that particular sector for us. Other engineers prefer to maintain, the wider variety of equipment and work on different stuff every day. They prefer to do anesthetic machines on a Monday and compressor intros on a Tuesday. So I think that's how we best develop people, is by giving them the opportunity to go in whatever direction they want within reason.
How big is that team of texture stuff?
So we've now got 4 people in our engineering team. Get my numbers right. Yeah, as of last week.
And the graduate who's still with you now is developing to sort of the scopes or specialist. Was it medical engineering at university's background?
Yes, it was. So we've got a couple of guys in the engineering team now who did specifically medical engineering degrees, which I know go back a few years wasn't maybe that common. Yeah. There's more and more courses out there at university level now, and going through the recruitment process recently, some of the candidates that are coming off those courses are really, really technically very strong, with a great kind of theoretical basis to work on. Pros and cons, and we can go into the differences in training approaches, but some of the university teaching of those great theoretically doesn't maybe give as much experience as other methods. We've had other candidates and other engineers come into the business who have had great hands-on experience, but maybe lack some of the theoretical knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you one way is better than the other.
But there's a balance, isn't there? No, I completely get that. I know your clinical engineering isn't your background. You told us that. However, from what you've seen from a distance, what do you think makes a good clinical engineering culture?
A good culture is easier. I thought you were going to ask me a technical question. I was panicking. A good culture, I think, my example of our scope expert is a perfect one, actually. All the engineers we have a specialism or multiple specialisms. They've got more experience in some areas than others. So being able to draw on somebody more experienced and then help each other within the team, I think has become really key for the way we work here. We might have a go-to lead on one area, but other engineers can always chime in and they can always draw on that experience. I think that's maybe, I don't necessarily think it's unique, but I think it's really important in the business we have. So to give an idea of scale, there'll be months where we're selling 3,000 or 3,500 items.
Okay.
There's no one engineer who's going to have the knowledge or the capability or the time to even look at 3,500 items in a month. That's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
So being able to work together, back to that culture question, to divide and conquer. Okay, I'm good at these. I'm quick at these. I'll handle this bit. Can you take that bit? Yeah. I'm stuck on this problem. Can I call 2 or 3 other colleagues to say, have we ever seen this before? It's all very well you having 5 years experience, but if your colleagues also got 5 years and somebody else got 7 years, you've got 17 years between you, haven't you? So in terms of the culture we have here, what we try and foster is really that kind of that sharing of knowledge. We're really key on trying to kind of compile that knowledge into something usable as well. So one of the sort of side projects our engineers have is in effect compiling an encyclopedia of the knowledge they have. It's not a formal training course. We have to fulfill those obligations as well. But in terms of, the tips and tricks you pick up along the way, how we can quickly triage jobs, how we can store things more effectively, whatever it might be. There's stuff that's put together quite a manual in the workshop of those kind of learning.
Those go-tos.
Yeah. Hopefully that answers your culture question, gives you an idea of how they work.